Thanks for listening in, everyone. Today we have Anisha, who was here before, and I'm so excited to talk about this because we are going to actually talk about AI and art. Both of us create art too, but I'm really happy to have Anisha here today just to discuss that and kind of see where the conversation goes and talk about different realizations about the state of AI right now as it pertains to like the creative field and the different questions that come up with it. So with that, I will let Anisha introduce herself.
Hi again. For those who haven't met me yet, my name is Anisha Patwardhan. I am a student and a teacher at the same time, which has been wonderful. I teach writing and reading comprehension. I have my own business, and so I teach one-on-one. And I love working with kids, so that's been wonderful. And then at the same time, I am a grad student at Harvard studying creative writing and literature, just like Fee is. So Fee and I met through that, and now we've had a lot of really cool conversations that I think have been really eye-opening for both of us. I'm excited to have yet another one.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, I think we can just jump in wherever. Did you have something that you wanted to talk about first, or I can start? Yeah, either way, go ahead.
So would you mind if I shared a bit about how this came up? So I think a few months ago, Fee posted a story on Instagram, and then I responded to the story and I asked if the background of that story image was AI generated or something that Fee had created on her own. And Fee said that it was AI, and we had a little conversation about it at that time, but I think, it's there's only so much you can talk about over message. And I have really strong feelings as a digital artist and about the use of AI in art and AI generated images and its ethics. And then Fee had another take, but I don't think we were able to get into that a lot. So that's just a little background about where this topic even came from and why we want to, see each other's viewpoints a little bit more clearly.
Yeah, totally. And one of the things I loved about you DMing me and like that conversation, because I think I was also putting stuff in my stories around different philosophical things too. But I loved how you like talked about it because sometimes we hide from, I don't want to say confrontation, but just like even just saying the thing, like as a society, we're like, oh no, we should be polite or kind or whatever the phrase is. And sometimes that actually prevents a relationship from revealing its true nature. And if we avoid conflict, we don't find what is eternal. And once we go through conflict and we get to the other side of it, that's when we find what is true. And so for me, your courage of like saying like, hey, T, you may not know this, but like other artists right now are blah, blah, blah. Like, or yeah, like kind of like, yeah, sharing that, that was really important to me. And I do know about like where artists have landed in like multiple different scenarios. And there's not a monolith also with artists, right? Like there are artists who are using AI generated music and creating completely AI generated like compositions and selling those. There are artists who use AI in their work in brand design and fashion design. And that's where the profit incentive and art, the connection there really is so interesting for me. One of the authors that I love, Carmen Maria Machado, her art got her writing got stolen, right? Like the models were trained on her work. So I found that interesting. I read her post and she was obviously in an emotional place about it, but like for me also intellectually, I found it interesting because if you think about whether artists are incentivized for our creativity, we're not. We're not. It's really hard to survive in the world as an artist. And so it's undervalued, right? However, that undervalued thing is then used for these tech companies that are they're training their product. I'm going to say product on something that is devalued in our natural world and then making a fuck ton of money. So it's like, is this actually valuable or not? Is creativity actually valued in this world or not? And in whose hands is it valued? And for what use is it valued, right? So that is like really upset about this. And then there's the other part of me that is like, I think this is an existential question. I think AI fundamentally reveals our mortality, the fact that we are insignificant beyond our own comprehension. There is no originality. And that's, I think, where the real tension lies. And so that's why when you messaged me, I was like, whoa, I want to talk about this, that I really love and that I think really matters. So yeah, any thoughts? Where do you want
Yeah.
to go? Let's go wherever.
Well,
Yeah.
I think you mentioned two parts of your thinking with this, so I wanted my like response to this in two parts as well. So I very much appreciate what you said in the first part of you where the value of art as other people see it, right? I mean, our art is always valuable to us as people who create art. I don't care if I'm the only person in the entire universe who will ever see that piece of art. I have drawn things, crumpled it, and thrown it away, and that is mine, right? I mean, no one's ever going to see it, but it has value to me, and I think that's what's important there. But I think a lot of it has to do with very much with the decline of arts education in our schools and the funding for that. And with arts education, we get art appreciation. And it's not something that's like, I mean, I had arts education growing up. I went to a public school and we did have arts education. It did as I kept going through school, and it wasn't, if I hadn't taken choir as my chosen elective, I wouldn't have had any exposure to arts in school at all. Like you had to elect to take those courses. And I think it's in these moments or even situations where we see the same kind of architecture repeating over and over again. I think we've all, like, Fee, you've traveled so much throughout America. I'm sure you've seen the same kinds of new apartment complexes showing up and you can't even tell where you are anymore. And I think it does that. And then this lack of appreciation for creative energy and for the process that people go through to create art, even if it doesn't seem like much. Sometimes it's the creative process that was the important part. And I think with the loss of art appreciation and arts education, we also lose as a society the ability to understand why we're so frustrated with the monotony of things. Because people are frustrated. People are frustrated with the fact that everyone's clothes look the same, that styles have become homogenized, that there's like, even when you're serving food, there are trendy ways to present food or to combine different ingredients. Even at that level, there are trends. And I do think that trends hop so quickly because people are getting bored of them, but art is not a trend, right? It's an expression of the soul. And I think I feel like that's really where it's coming from. That like a lot of tech people going throughout college, there are very, very few colleges that require a humanities or arts like elective or class at all. And I feel like there's so like the people who are capitalizing off of AI and AI generated images are not the ones taking these classes and understanding why these processes are important. So it comes from, like you said, a really like predatory capitalistic place that they're doing this. And I think that's what feels so icky. You had a second part, but we can stay because there was a lot that we just said. So yeah, I mean, I think we're on the same page on that part.
From what you said, there's just like something I want to touch on, which is about education. When I first started learning art, I didn't understand what goes into art. And after I took classes, when I went back to look at a painting, it was a completely different experience. I was like, I understood it's a choice. Every word you put in a story, you are choosing. It is pure self-determination. And so for it to be turned into this thing where there is a total loss of choice, there is no consent, it is mind boggling that it's just taken away so quickly. So that's kind of what came up for me when you were talking about the importance of understanding how we create. And I also found it interesting what you were saying about creatives and that whole piece because I realized a while ago I was meditating. Whenever I meditate, a lot of bullshit happens. Okay. So one of the things that happened is that I realized we are all inherently creative because we are all creating our futures. And that's when I started to see that we're operating from different connections to energy, to the universe. And we're not all connected to that soul part. It's not always being generated from there. And I mean, I don't know, for me, I can feel when it's coming from the soul and when it's not. And one of the yogis that I follow, her name is Srishti, and she talked about how AI and tech, it is inherently soul, and
Yes.
it in and of it, and because of such a explosion of it, we have to have the balancing force. So there has to be soul because there is so much lack of it in this one like area. So spiritually, that's where I land with it. But then when it comes down to the practicality of like living on this planet, like for the podcast, I generate my podcast descriptions in ChatGPT. Like I just put the transcript in. I'm like, and I know which quotes I like really want, and then I kind of tell it like, can you just make a podcast summary? Okay. I've been sitting with that too the last few weeks because I've been reading about the water use situation and the impacts on the planet. And I'm like, okay, what do I do about this? Do I keep generating these through ChatGPT or should I just write the description myself? I'm a writer, but the thing I like to write is not podcast descriptions. Like I don't enjoy that. So I've still been sitting with that tension and I haven't resolved it because I'm trying to figure out where I land with it. And that's just a very practical like example, okay? That's like purely like bureaucratic and not necessarily like, art related. Although there are copywriters who would say that like no, you need to, use copywriters. And that's why I think it really comes down to an existential question about our own insignificance because it is an identity question too. Fundamentally, people's identities are shifting. And it's like, okay, well, so like even for me, I'm like, okay, well, what is the point of me even trying to write a novel if I can just generate a novel and sell that? Why am I trying to write it, myself? And I've come to a few answers there that point. And I think that question of what is the point that actually has to be answered. And I think it's revealing that. I think all of these technologies are revealing that question. Anyway,
I'd love to know your answer though. Like, what answer did you find for? Since I'm also writing a novel,
yeah,
so what made you convinced that like I need to write this?
keep doing it. So this is again happened with meditation. This was a couple of months ago, but when I try to control the outcome, I burn out. So working from a place of detachment actually leads to a flow state for me. And when I go into something wanting it to turn out a certain way and I'm clinging and I'm like, give me this like exact outcome, my flow state actually gets blocked. And I don't feel like I'm connecting to whatever I normally can connect to. So I've learned to detach. And I've been practicing that because that emotion in my body of bringing something into being. Now, I feel that way. So how can I say that tech bros or whatever don't feel that way about AI? What if they also feel the same way? What if like my partner writes code? For him, code is the same. It's a creative act. It's not it's purely creative. He goes into a flow state. He almost channels and like writes code. And it's that same engagement at that consciousness level. How could I see that somebody else who's doing these LLMs or whatever and they're writing all of this stuff and they're creating this? What if that is also being channeled from a place, but then the product is this like meaningless, like soulless, like redundant thing that has no like connection. Like I can't connect to it the same way. So, and again, I don't have an answer, right? I'm not committing to any thought I'm having. I'm not believing any thought that I'm having inherently, but I am sitting in that. It's a very puzzling place to sit in, to really contemplate like these questions that I feel are inherently existential, mortality related, the fact that we're all going to die. Like I think it does come down to that at the end of the day again. So that's kind of where I'm sitting in that messy middle. I don't know if that answered your question exactly, but for me, basically, it's a body knowing.
That's really interesting. Thank you for sharing that. I think I have never generated an image through AI, but if we're going with this idea of detaching from what the finished product is supposed to be, it's a series of commands that are trying to get you something specific, right? Like an AI generated image. And it isn't about experimenting, finding a new way to do things. It's an instruction manual, but it's not even to a person who can, do things in a way that is like so creative and not even elevated. I don't think art needs to be elevated, but I think that there is a really human touch that people can put to that art. If we're going, you talked about like art being rewarded, and so many artists could be employed by now if people really valued the art and they gave these same instructions to an artist, like, I want a dog sitting on a tree and it's wearing striped pajamas, or it's and the sun is shining. There's so many people I know who could draw this, or paint it or sketch it. Like, I think it's also, it comes from this place of heartbreak that there's so many people who could have benefited from this, who could have made entire careers off of fulfilling the little whimsies, like these whimsical commissions. I think that sounds really wonderful and it's not happening. But there was another point that I was going to make. But yeah, I think with the existential question, I've been struggling existentially too lately. Not in a way where I'm in a state of turmoil. I think I am an existentially, I think in an existential way. And this is related. Okay. Recently, I watched this evolution documentary. I was trying to unwind. It was really, really stressful time of the semester, both for teaching and for learning. And I was like, I really love nature. I've not watched any documentary, like nature docs recently. And I love going into nature, but sometimes, like, if I'm at home, this is the closest I'm going to get, right? So, but of course, that's not going to be a peaceful experience for someone like me, because I immediately started thinking about how human existence is a blip, right? In the history of the universe, or forget the universe, our planet, right? Even within our planet, we have been around for a tiny fraction of a percent of that time. But at the same time, every single thing I feel, everything that happens to me in a physical sense, all of that is, I'm a person who feels very strongly and deeply and frequently, both emotionally and physically. I deal with, chronic pain in my knee and my shoulder, and I do yoga. I feel like I've become really aware of my body in all of its ways and my mind through therapy and meditation. And I think those things are so big to me. That's everything, right? Even the way I perceive the world and take it in, that is all then transcribed in feeling. That my memories are feelings. They are not just images that exist in observation. They are a product of feeling. And those feelings are so big that how can they not be significant? Like, how can my art not be significant? Again, even if I crumple it up and throw it away and no one will ever see it, it still meant something in that moment when I was creating it. And I think that's also where my feelings about the creation of it come from, that sometimes I don't even want to look at the end product. Maybe it's not even something that I wanted to do, but that feeling of making it, of like, I hate all of the vent art that I make when I'm upset. I haven't done it in a while, but there was a time when I used to do that a lot. I don't like how it looks, but I really loved how it felt. And that, like, if I typed in vent art into AI, I'm neither going to like how it looks or how it felt, So there's a point of catharsis, and it's personal. And I think both can exist, that yes, everything's going to go away. And like the aliens that find us a billion years from now do not care who made the art and may find the AI generated images to be like deeply meaningful. And then, I don't know, like a Monet to be worthless. But that's not what matters, right? Because we're here right now. But that sounded really cheesy, but that is really how it feels,
That's exactly the paradox. I realized a while ago, again through meditation, that we are not at the truth until we've arrived at the paradox. And the only things that are actually true are paradoxes. Because usually we're just seeing one side of the truth. For example, I found myself agreeing with a Trump voter about the medical industry in America. And I found that so bizarre. I was like, wait, we both agreed that this is a totally effed up situation. And that was mind boggling to me. And then I started to understand, the trick of the media, right? And I really started to see that we're being siloed and stuff like that. That was part of me understanding that truth is balancing. And so what you're talking about with what really matters is that we're here right now, and this acknowledgement that we're not going to be here one day. Like, this very moment is not going to have any, eventually, and that everything that we have is in the present moment, and it's constant grieving. And you mentioned I don't think you used the word grief. You used a different word. I'm trying to remember what it was, but heartbreak. You used heartbreak. And it's like even the present moment is so heartbreaking because it's going to be gone. How do we grapple with that? And I think it does connect to tech and it does connect to creating something because that is a path to immortality. And if you even listen to some of the the tech overlords, Peter Diamandis is one of them. I watched one of his like 2-hour podcast episodes last week, and he talked about how they're going to use AI to cure all diseases on Earth. Or is this coming from a higher calling? And I couldn't tell. I mean, I can't ascribe intentions to what he's doing, but I found it very revealing about, again, of like the existential question of death and his desire. He was talking about like 700 years from now. And I realized that a lot of them are planning in those scales, right? And so it is this attempt to control permanently. And that's why I think this topic reveals all of that to our own insignificance. And there's I want to read a Arundhati Roy quote later before we're done. But yeah, so that's kind of what came up for me too while you were talking. Also, you said something I love, the little whimsy. And I just love that phrase because I think that is part of the creative process is to allow yourself to have some whimsy, you know? And I just really loved that because I think that is what is not lost, it's warped. It's kind of warped when we're generating AI art. I mean, there's a lot of when I generate any AI art or even writing, right? It's kind of like gambling. I go in there and I'm like, okay, what is it going to do? Like, what if I type in this prompt? Is it going to, what I'm experimenting with? I'm not controlling the surprise of it. It's choosing what it's showing me. And then I can choose to keep that or generate something else. But I think there is also that like it's missing and the somatic sensation of creating is missing because I'm just typing. It's not even digital art that you're drawing. The experience is in the body. So it's not just purely mental, you know, you are processing physically. So it's also interesting to see what's lacking there. Anyway, that was roundabout. I don't really know if there was a point to any of that, but you said a bunch of stuff that triggered a bunch of other stuff, and so I was just sharing that.
Yeah. I don't know if you're on X or I hate saying it, Twitter, but
X Twitter.
whatever it is. But so many tech bros who'll go online and be like, look at this Michelangelo like fresco or this sculpture. Why don't we create these anymore? Like why does everyone's art look like this and not this? Did you know how those people could do that? Because they had funding, because they had patrons. They had people to like saying, here's all this money and all these resources, and you can take however much time you want. We just are interested in seeing this art. And that's how it happened. And it's, again, this comes from our lack of art appreciation, right? Like, you can't expect results like that if people are being paid pennies and are working out of like tiny studios or like shared art spaces and hoping that someone will pay them like enough for them to make rent. You know, none of that's gonna happen. Like, an artist does have to eat, and that's the biggest disconnect that I see. That, like, again, people have, I think, an innate aesthetic understanding. They have an innate understanding of aesthetics. That's why aesthetics and beauty is a philosophical, like, it is one of the 5 kinds of philosophy: aesthetics and beauty. Because we feel it, and it's something that we understand, but we can't put in words unless we actually study it. And so I don't want to say that like every single tech bro is soulless, but I do think a lot of them are completely ignorant and uneducated in this way. Like, they think they're brilliant and they don't have the slightest clue of what art really takes. You know? I also just think like it's so easy to pick up a piece of paper and a pencil, and if you really wanted the dog in the tree to, try drawing it yourself. And I feel like that would be so much more fun. And that experience of creating that image is prolonged. It's now art because you took time to make it. It took longer, and it's a longer experience. And you keep going back to it saying, wow, I really moved the pencil this way and decided, like you talked about choices, right? Decided to put whiskers this way, and I wanted to put spots on the dog. I didn't think I wanted to do that, but it looks so funny now. I love it, you know? I think there's also that whimsy. It's not just whimsy in what you want to see, but whimsy in doing something that's just silly and fun. And it doesn't need to be serious, which means that you don't need to have all of this programming and code. You brought up like curing all of the world's diseases. Why are we using the same energy to make an image? You know, like that energy should go towards something like curing a disease, because there's actually a time limit, right? People are actually going to die if they don't those diseases are not cured. And I just feel like there's a completely warped sense of urgency, but it's because one pays more than the other. And and if we're talking about the medical industry, we have no idea this is so dark, but they're making money off of people being sick, right? I feel like if cures are made and then eventually cures become accessible, right, and not as expensive, they lose out on a lot. And that's a horrific thought, but I also really think that capitalism does warp our sense of humanity. And we don't know how many things are entangled in putting our attention towards creating these images rather than using it for solving world hunger and, doing things that are actually time sensitive. And you know what? It's okay if it takes less time and the process is not the way that it is for art. Like, we're on a deadline, That's also a jumble of thoughts in response to your jumble of thoughts.
No,
So.
I love it. And you were talking about how did Michelangelo get his art to that point. One of the things, and I wrote about this with my partner, is that when we create, what I've noticed for myself, and when I want originality, and I don't go to other writers, other artists to get originality. I go there to get inspired, but I don't go there to get originality. Originality for me comes from my subconscious. And AI, so far that I know of, it might have a subconscious, but its subconscious is not the human subconscious. When we create from our subconscious, ours, that is consciousness, and it's what's unconscious within us. So it's that duality. And that's when I create from that place. And when I access those places through dreams or, whatever, meditation, even like one of the ways I write actually is I close my eyes and write. If I look at the screen, I'm immediately critiquing the grammar of what I'm writing. But when I close my eyes, I don't see it and it flows because it's coming from that shadowed part of me. And that's what makes it memorable. And that's part of what Michelangelo also did. And other artists who were accessing that part. And AI doesn't have access to that part. So it's going to inherently be derivative. And we're going to know that it is derivative. Except for I did run into some photos that were AI generated of people. I don't know if you've seen these, but like I was freaked. Like they were really realistic. And not just that, like there were these like AI influencers who are actually very realistic looking. Like I couldn't tell they were talking and everything. And I couldn't tell that it was like, I'll just put the photo in here. So like that's a purely AI generated like photo. And when I don't know what my camera's doing. But when I was looking at it, I was like, wait, what? This is not, here's another one. Like this one, they got the skin texture. I was looking at all of these and I was like, what the heck? This is kind of bizarre. Like, you can still tell because of the back. If you see a slew of them, you'd be like, yeah, that's probably AI generated. There are some like telling features. But in general, for me, when I saw this dude, I would believe that's a photo of a man if somebody told me that. Like, I wouldn't think twice. And then I was thinking about, and then it goes into other things too around lawsuits. For example, there are a lot of lawsuits right now. Like the Dow Jones apparently is suing Perplexity AI for its use of plaintiff's copyrighted news content in Perplexity AI's retrieval augmented generation solution. So I'm like, man, okay, that's kind of nuts. Like there are some pretty big lawsuits that are going to play out over the next few years it's going to really like kind of show us where we're landing in terms of ethics around this. I'm also wondering though, like with the state of everything right now, like what's actually going to happen. So for me, I don't have an answer, but I am curious about what's going to what's going to come about. And you're right about the profit incentive too for all of these things, including, for example, Ozempic or Wegovy, which are the weight loss injectables. I just watched a video about how they're coming up with even more addictive food because the profit, you saw that? Yeah. And I was watching that and I was like, yeah, this totally tracks that they would do this. Like why did I think that they wouldn't do this? Like the fact that I am still surprised makes me feel stupid. I'm like, I should know better than to be surprised by this. Like, I feel like if I say, of course, this is what, is it allowing it to continue by saying that it makes sense that they are doing this?
Mm.
And that's where I kind of am sitting too these days of like, if I understand their pathway, am I condoning it by understanding it? Anyway,
Yeah.
that was a
No,
lot.
I understand. Yeah. There's so much. And this is, I mean, this is a little bit of a random thought, but I think you can make a connection with all of these strategies and this pivot towards like, and, dictatorships and authoritarian regimes to redirect your attention towards something insignificant to a lot of people is just entertainment, right? It's government generated entertainment. I mean, have you seen the White House socials lately? Like the amount of
Yeah, it was weird. I was like, I don't think you guys understand what you're doing. Like, why are you even like the one of Gaza? And I was just like, what? Like,
yeah.
what? Like, I think in their mind, it was some attempt at like a shiny new future. And I'm sitting over here and I'm like, you are so off base with this that it's delusional, like in an
Mhm.
actual, like, it's like you have to see reality for what it is, not just for the fantasy of what you want it to be or even the potential of what it could be. That's how
Mm.
we end up in abusive situations, right? That we think of the what this could turn into, and so we keep going back to the person or whatever. That's
Mm.
what I saw. I was like, no, bro, look at what is actually happening. Don't just feed us this thing that to change the narrative in whatever way and market it.
Yeah. So yeah, so much like the like Ghibli trend where the creator of Studio Ghibli is like one of the most prominent figures against AI, like he almost is like violent towards it, where it's like, do not touch it. And I just found it so sad because if you've ever watched a Studio Ghibli film, none of those images actually resembled any parts of those films. Like it's an amalgamation that then becomes what it's not. It's like I think it makes me think of like the Platonic forms, how the forms of the ideas, if
Will
you
you
actually.
say more about that?
So there, Plato came up with this idea of these like Platonic forms or like these layers of reality. And he said that the most real layer are ideas. And interestingly, he puts art at the bottom because that's he calls it like recreations of things that exist or they're false. It's false because it's not real. But if you can put an idea, like a name to the idea, suddenly it's not actually that Platonic form because that idea is beyond words, beyond compartmentalization. And I think Platonic forms can be applied in very interesting ways and also not work in a lot of interesting ways. But I think it connects really well to this, where it's like you want Studio Ghibli, it's not really Studio Ghibli because you've now just ascribed this label to it. Even if you said like I want the house moving castle style, it's still going to be more specific than just here's this, right? Or like I want to paint in the Renaissance style. Are you thinking Italian, French, like Dutch, like which Renaissance, which year, which artist? What are we talking about, right? I think there's a loss of specificity. And even if you talk about artists, like I don't like Picasso at all, but he's a great example of someone who has eras, right? Not all of his art looks the same. So there's particular art of his that is very famous, but that's only a fraction of the art that he's done over his lifetime. So even an AI generated Picasso is not really going to be Picasso because Picasso now would not even look like Picasso then if he were still alive now. There's so much to it that it's like, okay,
Well,
he died and that's it. Let's move on. Let's create new art, right?
yeah.
So much to it.
No, that's true. And that goes back to the conversation about the present moment, right?
Mm.
Because that is where everything is the most potent and alive, not alive in the past and it's not alive in the future. And like that's something that we have to grapple with. And yeah, I love that point that you're making about derivative, right? There are things being derivative and I think that's what's happening. And I think inherently as people are creating it more and more, it's less valuable. It just is because it's not really earned. And people know, even when I make it, I'm like, it's fake. Like I'm like, I know it's fake. I'm like, this isn't really real. Like I don't even feel the desire to take credit for it because Like there's a part of me that's just like, I just haven't earned it, right? Like there is a part of me that wants to have mastery, that wants to actually earn something. Or like if you do a workout or if you just actually master something, like up level your skills, right? And that's just inherently missing. It's not as satisfying as creating it yourself. And it's like fast living, fast eating, fast making, right? It's all of that speed element, right? So I totally see that point of things also. There is just something missing in it. But yeah, I haven't like landed somewhere on what I think about the whole thing. I know you have, and like the other friend I talked to who's an artist, like she's also like, just don't touch it, you know. But for me, I'm kind of in the tension. I'm in the like, well, when is it okay? When is it not? What is going to happen with it? When am I exploiting the earth? When am I not? What use can I justify it for? When is it therapeutic for people? When does it actually create something that's way better than anything I could ever create? You know, when is it way beyond my skill level? And what does that say about me? So I'm just kind of sitting in all of those questions and I haven't landed somewhere yet. That's why I was excited to talk about this.
It was really an interesting conversation for me. I think taking the time to listen to you, I think I judged you really quickly at the beginning. And I do like I think it's a polarizing topic and I'm not afraid of confrontation, but I also have in the past just colored someone with one opinion, right? And I think we agree on basically most of, so I think it's really interesting. And even if we did it, I think it would have still been a really fruitful conversation because I don't think
Yeah.
we get to articulate this as much as it all just stays in our head, right? And I think we made a lot of connections
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
wouldn't have happened if we hadn't vocalized it. So,
Yeah. And I think if there's spaciousness where neither of us have to change our position, we can stay in our own energy, you know, like what's wrong with that? Like, I don't need agreement, you know? And there's this Lao Tzu quote. I think I read it last time too, but he says, like, if you think the world can be improved, it cannot be improved. It's already perfect. If you treat it like an object, you'll lose it.
mhm,
And that's how I've been feeling lately. I'm like, we need to just stop trying to change things
mhm,
because it is what it is, right? But I also at the same time have a really hard time and I really get fired up about certain things and I have a very low tolerance for certain kinds of suffering. So there is also that part of me that's like we have the opportunity to see suffering in many areas. So why are we continuing it? And at some point we just have to say no too. But yeah, no, I really appreciated this and you know, thank you for coming on and we're out of time. Do you wanna share anything before we close for today?
yeah, just super quickly. I mean, I've heard recently that a lot of people have felt that art and writing is daunting, but I think you just have to start somewhere. I think like mythology is a great start. There's so many like abridged versions of mythology, and getting into that, visiting art museums if they're accessible to you. Your local library probably has lots of art books, just books full of art with explanations. I think there are a lot of ways to access art, and it is not as inaccessible as people say that it is. And I think what is hard to get past is not wanting to make the effort to do more than just sit at your computer and, go straight to one particular site. So that is my recommendation for today.
Yeah, no, I love that. Yeah, and it is daunting. I think that's a good point. It's worthy, and that's why it's daunting.
Mhm.
So, and there's a quote that says that everything we want is on the other side of fear. So, kind of exploring that. Well, thank you so much, and thank you for everybody else who's listening in. I'm gonna stop the recording soon, but yeah, thank you, Anisha, for being here and for this conversation about AI and